Everything is good until it's not, and everything works until it doesn't. This is No Singular Solutions. All right. Welcome to the No Singular Solutions podcast. My name is Joshua Hoyt, and I believe that no matter what you've been through, that you will see, I totally screwed that up. I believe that no matter what you've been through, you can still achieve greatness and help others along the way. That's the beautiful part about an uncut, unedited podcast is you get stage fright when you have a guest. Look out. So I created this podcast to help you with your self-awareness and self-discovery. And we just talk about how you can be authentically impactful. This episode specifically is about grief and forgiveness. So in previous episodes, I had talked about feedback on fives, and we wanted to take listener questions and turn them into an episode that helped not only answer that question, but also provided additional insight on the topic. So the question that I received was about forgiveness. And I started to think, for my forgiveness, it came out of grief. And I have a guest today who was honestly the first one that came to mind when I thought about grief and forgiveness. Our recent engagement on some of our social content, being aware of each other's story, but just really getting into the meat on the bones, for lack of better terms. So my guest today is the Donella Olson. She is a friend of mine from high school. She is a industry peer in construction, a licensed general contractor, and welcome. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you.
This is going to be fun, right?
Yeah. It's real fun getting uncomfortable.
Right? Well,
thank you so much for inviting me on the show. I'm honored that you would think of me first in that way. And also don't really know what to think about it, but as you know, I'm trying to sort of get out of my box a little on the things I have to say. And so going a little unfiltered and today unscripted. So we'll see where this goes. But thank you for inviting me.
I appreciate
it. It's a real trip to be back in the old hood.
Right.
Rah Tigers.
Yep.
I never get back this way. So this is pretty funny. I was on my way here and I was driving down and I was like, where am I right now?
It looks different.
It looks totally different. And I drove by the old Hildy and I was like, what up, Welchmans?
Right.
So I'm really happy to be here. And it's just, I feel like the topic that we're talking about today, it's really fitting to be in the old hood. So
it's almost full circle when you think about it, right?
Yeah.
So for those that don't know who you are, take a few minutes and just tell us who you are and what you do and all the things.
Okay. Well, let's see. I'm Donella Olson. I went to high school with Joshua. And let's see, I have, as you mentioned, I am in the construction industry. I remodel houses in the Minneapolis and kind of western suburbs area. I own my own company, Two Island Design Build, and have been designing and remodeling homes for 25 years. So that's my professional background. My personal background is that, let's see, how can I say this succinctly? I have been through a lot and I've lived to tell about it. And I'm here to kind of just scratch the surface on a few of those things. So
I appreciate that. You hit on a few points that we covered in previous episodes talking about attitude, vulnerability, right? Confidence. You are absolutely a confident person. You project that, right? But this is a layer of vulnerability too, right? This is getting into a topic that is deeply personal to each of us and to many others. And we wanted to be able to have that conversation because we've never had it. And so ours very similar yet a little different. And
Mhm.
so let's get uncomfortable. Let's
Yeah,
just get right
let's do
into it.
Yeah, ask me anything.
You lost a parent at a young age.
I did.
Tell me more.
So, as some of your listeners will know, because we know each other, um, in high school when I was 17, my mom died of cancer, and real pretty quickly. Um, she had about a 4-month battle with melanoma, and we lost her. And that was, as far as our shared experience, that was, losing a parent. And I also lost my sister only a few years later, my older sister, Linda, which some of you also know. So there's a lot of like layers of the different amounts of grief and the way that it affects you differently when it's a different person in your life. So, um, losing a parent, it's funny I say that I lost my mom when I was 17. We talk about when we talk about the major episodes in our lives, we think about how old we were or what we were going through at the time. Um, but it's also really, I think, important to note that my mom was also very young. She was 38, and so that leaves a lot to discover as I grow older too, because I'm now older than 38. and so you start to have to kind of navigate life on your own without the what you think would be their guidance, because you don't know where they would have been at that age. And so that's a funny thing to deal with.
It is. And first and foremost, sorry for your loss. It's you were 17, I was 19, right? Your mom was cancer, my dad was suicide. Your sister was also
A
I,
car
car
accident.
accident. That's right. Yep. So there's very, when you think about grief and forgiveness comes out of the dealing with grief or the coping. It's a portion of closure, but the grief comes from that sudden loss.
Mhm.
And it hits, in my opinion, my perspective, it hits a little bit different when it's sudden 4 months, sudden car accident, sudden suicide, um, end of age death. It's why they call it a celebration of life. There's still
Mhm.
grief, but there's a whole different perspective because it's not planned, but it's coming at some point.
Mhm.
And when you have that tragedy, especially early in your life, it hits everybody differently. And one of the questions that I wanted to ask you, again, because the only way to do this the right way is to get uncomfortable
Mhm.
and start having the conversations out loud that we have inside our head. When my dad committed suicide, like I resented him right away. I had a ton of
Mhm.
resentment towards him. Tell me a little bit about how at any point in your life post your mom's passing that you felt like you resented her, whether it was for not being there, not you led into that a little bit about
Mhm.
how not being there for that tutelage or mentorship, but have you ever found yourself resenting her?
Absolutely.
Okay.
That I mean, uh, I think before we even get into this,
Yeah.
I wanna say to listeners, um, it is absolutely okay and normal for you to be angry with a dead person. Y You have every right to be angry with someone who isn't here anymore. I think a lot of people have a really difficult time processing the different emotions that come along with not only the immediate portion of grief, but as you go through life, as you move through life, that grief is going to come back and revisit you. And you are allowed to process it differently, feel differently about it at different times in your life. And it is totally okay, totally normal to be angry with a dead person. I've been there a lot of times, and for different reasons. Um, And I think it's also really important to talk about, um, you know, you can having resentment for someone who has passed on, that you were resenting them before they died. Because, part of my history is that I didn't live with my mom. My parents divorced when I was very young. I was 2 years old. And I lived with my dad. And so I didn't see my mom as often, nearly as often as I should. And we weren't, she, let me just say, she was a wonderful person. Um, but we also were not as close as we should have been. She didn't get me as much as she got my sister at that time in her lives. And I think that was just really difficult for her. And that's one of the things that, you know, I've been resentful of and processed, and now kind of understand. I think I understand more about why we weren't close. Um, and so there were I was a teenager at the time, and also at the time was processing some other things having to do with just life and her and general angst of being a teen and all of those things. And so even as she was sick and as she was um, more and more just sort of moving away from me, because that's what happens when you have tumors in your brain. Um, there was a lot of that resentment that was happening as she was dying. And then after she was gone, what happens is the whole family comes around and you have a funeral and you have all this talk about the person that died. And when you feel like you were cheated on, that that you didn't get enough of that person when they were around, um that can start to feel almost phony. And you start to question, like, did I even know this person at all? Did these people know this person at all? And so there's a lot of like having to figure out whether you knew that person and how they actually impacted your life. And you just keep doing that throughout life. I mean, it's been all these years and I still find myself thinking, okay, I wonder if that's what she was thinking in that situation, a memory from childhood or a memory from whatever that I'll reprocess and I'll think, oh, okay, I kind of get it now. Or, what the hell? And it
Yeah.
just it keeps going. So,
So how do you best explain in your situation specifically the times in which you felt as if you resented your mom? And I guess I'm going to keep that more. Let's keep it on your mom because
mhm,
your sister, car accident. It's
yeah,
really hard to. They're very different scenarios,
yeah,
right? And it's
right,
mom,
right.
but like how did what did that look like? Those times in your life where the anger came back out, you you were processing differently, and it went from like grieving and sadness to like resentment.
Mhm.
Tell me a little bit about that.
Uh, Let me just even try to like pinpoint um, there, uh, okay, so at a certain points, while my husband and I had been having conversations about like having our own kids, and we do not have kids, but as we had those conversations and we're going through the time in our, everyone's life when it's, time to have kids or not have kids,
Mhm.
and um, really not being able to understand for myself whether I was going to be a good parent or whether that is being clouded by my experience with my own mom, and just and what I thought about her, um, as being a good mom or not being a good mom. Um, I'm not really pulling up like anger with that, but just really
Disappointment?
Not so much disappointment, but like the not knowing
Sure.
is sometimes enough to make you like angry. Like,
Mhm.
why weren't you around more so that I could understand you and so you could understand me and we could have been closer? And so that I wouldn't be so confused right now about whether I think I would raise good kids or like, and so that there's a lot of that.
That brings up even another layer too, because
Mhm.
I didn't know this, and when we were going to school, I didn't know that your parents were divorced.
Oh,
So that's another layer of that, right? Is there's a parent that you had said age 2. Um, you didn't say anything about a stepmom or any of that, but just you look at it and you go, mom and dad, right? There's that my mom, the presence of mom in life
mhm.
is different in your experience than others, right? I mean, I in my household, like my parents were married, but there was times that it was not good, and yet same household, there was another side of that. So then as you grow older and you get to age 17 and then you lose her to cancer, then there's the not only is my mom gone, but there's a part of me that feels like my mom wasn't there to begin with
Mhm.
too. And so that processing of all of that at such a young age where you're becoming a woman yourself, you're looking at the next phases of life and modeling off of examples of positive female, roles in your life, like that to
Or
me,
negative.
or negative. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, right. Right. And so that, I guess that question, for resentment for me was it, I don't want to say it's easy, but yeah, I'm pissed off. My dad made a decision and he
Mhm.
gone, right?
Yeah.
Yours has another layer to it with mom's presence through your growing up.
Yeah, like, and I think you know what, that's really insightful that you would go that direction because that's probably when we talk about like being angry or being resentful, um, yeah, it's more of, it's less about, why aren't you here now? It's more about why did you choose not to be here then?
Mhm.
And she's not here now for me to, as an adult, go to her and say, "What the hell?" And we never had that conversation before either, because you don't have that kind of conversation with your
No.
parents when you're a kid.
Not typically,
Not
right? Yeah,
typically. I mean,
right,
some
right.
people
Some
do, and
people
if you
do.
do,
Yeah.
great, do it.
Yeah.
But you just do, there were ways that okay, so I think it's really important too that people understand, and this kind of goes into the forgiveness part of the topic, um, is that um, adults fail kids all the time. Um, so if you're an adult and you're feeling like you're failing your children or any other kids in your life, young people in your life, you are, but it's okay.
Well
Because
said.
it happens all the time. I mean,
Yeah.
um, I had like I we're talking about how much, I resent my mom, but she was an amazing person. She was an amazing human being. She had a circle of friends around her that absolutely adored her. She had family who so she was the oldest of 7 kids. And so she has, a whole gaggle of sisters and brothers who just adored and looked up to her, even as an adult. And they still talk about her like she was she was the best. And she was. I mean, she was an amazing human being. And I know that in a lot of ways, I remind myself of her. Um, but I remind myself of her in the good ways and the bad ways. And one of the things that I'm one of the reasons that I'm even on this podcast with you is because I know that one of the things that she wasn't good at is being vulnerable, being in situations where she was, needed to talk about the things that were important. And so here I am, trying to like not repeat the same things or
Yeah.
whatever.
No.
And so I hope that that's something that is working for me. I don't know, but
It is. It's, so we started by saying it was going to be on grief and forgiveness, right? And I think, well, first, forgiveness is a gift that you give yourself.
Mhm.
Forgiveness is not about the other person.
Correct.
When you have a traumatic loss, specifically a parent, and the grief that is associated with that finds its nasty little head in your life at different points, and especially when you least expected it. In my case, it was right away. It was dad committed suicide. He's gone. I'm pissed. Right. That was a year. I mean, almost to the day of Becky dying. And I was already pissed because of how that thing happened and not being at the funeral and not being there for her last days and not being a part of any of it, like stolen from me. So the resentment that I had towards my parents was already there. Then my dad commits suicide. So I am livid. And it's just me and my sister. I'm now the male in the family, right? But I've got this Marine Corps thing that I'm doing for all the wrong reasons right now, and I'm just in this tailspin. And I'm 19 years old, and I know someday I'm going to be a dad, and I'm going to have these experiences with my kids that I know I'm going to be pissed off at my dad again because Grandpa's not here to do the things. And then you projected on, like I projected on my mom in certain ways because now she's the sole parent. And so at the time, I don't know that it's mental health. Like I had no, this is 25 years ago. I had no concept of, I knew what depression was. I knew what anxiety was. I knew what anger was. I knew what bad mental health, but I didn't realize how much it was just going to rear its nasty head over and over and over and over and over again. And 25 years later, a quarter of a century, I'm actually able to talk about it openly. I can say how pissed off I was at my dad. I can tell the story about how I've grieved and how I've worked my way through it. But it ultimately has to lead to a point of forgiveness because that's what I need to give myself. And have you forgiven your mom?
Oh yeah.
Long
Yeah,
time
yeah,
ago?
yeah, and over again, and
Good.
still sometimes I'm like, what, that pisses me off. But no, I mean, because I know that she had her own life and her own demons and her own reasons for the things that she did or didn't do. Um, the same as I have my own reasons and, things that I've done and haven't done. And yeah, I mean, I try to not have regrets about that because then I have to go back and say you were 17.
Right.
You weren't the one that was supposed to have those conversations. She was.
You didn't have the benefit of hindsight at the time.
Right. Exactly. And the thing is that I also know that if she was still here now, she would have wanted to have those conversations with me that, are part of helping your daughter live in the world. So, yeah, I mean, I think that you're right. It's about forgiveness isn't really about them. It's about you. Um, and it's not about saying what happened was okay. I'm not saying like, oh, it's okay that you weren't here when I was 6, or, it's okay that you um didn't come to all my stuff when I was in middle school or high school or whatever. I'm not saying that's okay. I'm saying it's done. It's in the past.
Right.
There was a reason, and it doesn't matter anymore. And it's really, I think a little side note about forgiveness is we're talking about forgiveness when it has to do with a parent that's passed away.
Yes.
But there's also, obviously forgiveness toward people who are still with us. And it's important to note that forgiving someone who still is alive and is able to be around you and in your life, it's not about saying what you did was okay and you're welcome to be in my life. It's about saying what's done is done and I'm moving on.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't make it okay. It doesn't make it something that didn't affect you. It doesn't invalidate it. It just means I'm done with dealing with this. I'm done with spending my time on it and energy on it.
Let's talk about that a little bit more, because like I said, the premise for this episode was it came out of questions from a listener who was asking specifically about forgiveness and how you forgive. What does it look like?
Mm-hmm.
What is your perspective? And you're right. That was a great point about how our conversation, grief and forgiveness, is from the perspective right now of two kids who lost a parent. But we have to learn how to forgive every day,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's violating a healthy boundary, whether it's someone does wrong to you, whatever it may be. There's situations, and we have the benefit of, at least today in real time, having that personal conversation with ourselves about where we want that relationship to be moving forward.
Mm-hmm.
And so I know that when it comes to forgiveness, it's about me, right? Forgiveness is completely within me. So without using a specific example, we'll just say that you have a good relationship with someone else, right? It could be coworker, friend, family, doesn't matter, inner circle. You have a relationship and a healthy boundary was crossed. Whether or not you had clearly defined expectations of that boundary, both people feel as if something was wrong, something
Mm-hmm.
we were, disrespected, whatever it is. And even in the case where the other party doesn't know, they don't know that they violated your trust or whatever it was, you have to give yourself permission to forgive, because what you can't control is the other person. You can't
Correct.
control how they think, why they did it, the timing. You can't control any of that. And I think, if, at least in my experience, most people, when they think about forgiveness, it's about trying to right the wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that personally has nothing to do with forgiveness. Like
Yeah,
nothing. But
right.
so many people get stuck on that. They're like, I can't forgive this person until they admit that they were wrong or they apologize. No, no, I
That's
can.
not true.
That's not true.
Yeah,
No. So
right.
let's talk about that for a second, because you cannot want something for someone else more than they want it for themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And when you've been wronged or you've had a situation where it's not healthy, it's okay for us to have forgiveness, right?
Yeah.
But we have to understand we can't go back and change them and how they reacted in that situation, and that happens only every day,
Yeah.
right? Tell me, just tell me more, like go into that a little bit.
Yeah. So you're totally right. Like and that's the really the foundation of um forgiveness as a concept is, and this took me a very long time to learn, a whole lifetime to learn, that you cannot change other people. You can want to change other people. You can't change them. Fundamentally, you can't change other people. You can try to inspire them. You can live by example. You can do all the things that maybe might help them want to change, or to shift their perspective, or better their behaviors, whatever it is. You can live by example to do that, but you cannot change them. And if the way that a person operates in the world is harmful to the way that you operate in the world, you have the ability to say, okay, that's how they're going to be. And it doesn't mesh with my worldview or the way that I want to operate. So I'm going to say, okay, you go be you, and I'm going to go be me. And we're not going to live in the same life anymore. We're not going to cross anymore.
Mhm.
And that's a really, really hard thing to do. Whether it is in a professional situation, where you're being influenced by a coworker, or the way that you're being led or not led by a boss. It could be, a colleague or a friend. It could be a family member. And when it's a family member, especially, a parent or a very, a sibling or whatever, it's really, really difficult to make that decision, to say, I can't, this is not a healthy thing in my life anymore, and I need to remove it.
There's a lot of
it's a
there's a lot of courage with that, right? That's part of embracing mental health, and again, differentiating from mental health in a negative context because of the end result of bad mental health, and treating it as what it is. It's the health of your brain. It's the health of your feelings and your thoughts, as much as your physical health is about stretching and muscles and food and all the things, right? But it takes an incredible amount of courage, and after self-discovery and self-awareness, to get yourself to a position to where you can say, I don't need answers as to why we had this conflict. I don't need them. I might want them. I might want to better understand why we had this really good relationship that went bad. I want to understand because it's going to help me. Like, you don't need any of that. You have to have the courage to say, this is not healthy for me. I recognize that absent getting all of this information, I'm moving on and severing relationships, sometimes decades long with people, sometimes with family members. To me, that's forgiveness. I'm giving myself permission to say, I'm okay with whatever happens going forward. I don't need the answers. I don't need to go back and try to rehash the thing because it doesn't matter. It's over. And I think that's what I would want people to take away on forgiveness is, you don't need to reconcile with the other party to find peace in yourself.
Right.
You need to find peace in yourself first by accepting that I can move on without getting all these details.
Yeah.
Especially with family members, especially with coworkers. And I just don't think people realize that. I don't think it's not easy by any stretch, but it can be reduced to that simple of a decision is, can I be okay moving forward without answers? Because that's what I need to have forgiveness to myself in this situation. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. And forgiveness, I think for a lot of people who haven't been able to like really process why they're feeling a certain way about a person who's wronged them, I think forgiveness can feel like justice, and
good point.
it's not.
Right.
So, when people think about forgiveness in the sense that the wrong has been righted,
Yeah.
they're not interchangeable. They're not the same word. Justice is, redemption for somebody doing something wrong, morally or whatever.
Yeah.
And forgiveness is about saying, whatever it is that caused this situation, whatever it is that is behind the reason this person is acting this way or doing these things that are hurtful to me or cross my boundary, that doesn't matter. None of that matters.
Right.
I mean, it matters in the sense that you care about the person, or you want to make
Right.
sure, that you want them to be okay. But at a certain point, you have to decide for yourself that it's not up to you to make them okay.
Correct.
And truly, what I've come to realize is that when people wrong you, like you said, sometimes they don't even know they wronged you. But B, when people wrong you, it has so much more to do with what's going on in their own lives and in their own minds, and you cannot change that.
No, you
The
can't.
only person that has any control over what happens in that person's life is them, and the only person that has control over what happens in your life is you. So you can either wallow and you can beg them to change, and you can try to get justice and keep living in that situation over and over and over again, whether it's with that same person or recreating it with other people. Or you can look at yourself and you can say, this is one of the things, is who's the common denominator? It's me. What am I allowing? And what am I going to change about the way that I approach this situation? Sometimes it means moving on.
Right.
Sometimes it means approaching that person and saying, hey, this is why I'm hurt. Either way, it's really hard to do.
Oh, for sure.
If you're invested in a situation or a person, it is really a difficult thing to do. I mean, it is in some cases soul crushing, but you have to be the one to make that decision.
I really appreciate how you use the term justice with that, because I've never thought of it in that way. Is forgiveness is not about justice. It's not like, I think the average person probably feels before they can forgive someone else for the thing that happened, that there needs to be some form of justice. And like you said, it doesn't necessarily mean like they have to have something happen to them, but it could even just be the realization of like the pain that it caused, or how somebody reacted or moved on with not the best amount of information or inaccurate information. And then you came into another point, which is no matter what the situation is, there's some level of healing going forward, right? Because the situation had some level of hurt. And whether it's the loss of a parent, the grieving, the hurt, like, you cannot heal until you acknowledge what is causing the pain. And so you talked about how in a relationship where you have that disagreement, you have that thing that is just, it's so strained and it's so bad that you're like, I got to get out of this thing. This is not good. You have to first acknowledge what it is that's causing that pain. Is it the person? Is it what they said? Maybe it's what they're going through in their life today that just, they snapped and they said something that was really hurtful. You have to acknowledge that first. And what do you do when all it is acknowledgement to myself? Like, what do you do when the other person, they might not even know they did it. They're not willing to have the conversation, but you say, I need to move forward. I need to get out of this situation, whether it's severing that relationship, but for my mental health, for my well-being, for my family, for everything that I'm doing, I need to move forward. And that person is just sitting there going, what happened? I don't get it.
Yeah.
But you have no control over any of it. Like, how do you do that?
Well, I think it's really important to have tools. Really, I mean, the same as building a house.
Yeah.
You have to have your tools to move through life in a way that is, that you're you're not just moving through life, you're moving through life purposefully.
Yeah.
You need to have tools for coping with certain situations, or building a better life for yourself. And in this kind of a situation where what really it's about boundaries, and about making a change in your life. So the kind of short list of tools that I kind of draw on for that kind of a situation, and it's taken me a long time to figure this out, but the few tools are, realize, you have to acknowledge, like you said, you have to realize that this is a problem and what the problem is. you have to decide that you're going to make a change. And then you need to figure out what your plan is. You have to figure out, not only, you can't just say, you're done, I'm out, we're moving on, and then expect to be able to just move forward.
Right.
Not only does that not work for your own psyche, but you have someone else that is saying, hey, wait, what about me? And you're moving on. And that's, while you may need to just cut ties in some situations, it's not really fair to that other person because you haven't told them what's going on. Maybe you have. If you have, great, and you're moving on and it's fine. But you need to be able to have a plan for how you're going to move forward. And then once you have that plan, create a script for yourself that you repeat to yourself while you're driving in your car alone or into the mirror or to a friend or whatever it is. Just a script that you, if you are in the situation where you need to confront this, this is what plays in your head. And these are the words that come out of your mouth so that you're prepared, because muscle memory is strong and it happens in your brain too. So if you're repeating the thing that you've told yourself, if in this situation, this is what I'm going to say, or in this situation, this is what I'm going to do, you're much more likely to do it rather than falling back into old patterns. I mean, this can be the same for anything, quitting smoking, going to the gym, whatever it is. If you have the tools and you have the plan and you have the script, you're much more likely to follow through with it, and hold your own boundaries.
Because it's life, right? So it's not a matter of if, it's when.
Correct.
We're going to have conflict. We're going to have grief. We're going to have all the suck of life is going to hit us at different phases, right? And you're right. I think that really gets to the premise of why I started this podcast, right? Is to create great conversations with different people on different perspectives and different experiences to build that toolbox, right? To put it together so that whether you're listening to this and you lost a parent at an early age, you lost a best friend 2 weeks ago, you're dealing with some level of conflict in your life, and you've got someone that you care about and they matter and they've crossed that healthy boundary, and you find yourself in this turmoil, whatever it is, like whatever those situations are, I hope that we can equip the listeners and those that hear this podcast with those specific tools, right? That personal self-awareness, the journey of self-discovery. How do we do the thing? How do I learn to forgive? So that whether you're dealing with that situation now or the one that's coming, that's inevitable, you know how to approach it from our perspective. Again, we're not doctors. We're definitely not giving professional advice. We're providing our insight and our perspective on all the things that are going to happen in life, and we all think about, but we just don't quite know what the next step is. And there's a lot to unpack with grief and forgiveness, and we could definitely go for hours into either one of those. What do you want to tell? You got open mic. What do you want?
Are you sure you want that?
Oh yeah, I tell you, here, people know. Those that are still listening to us 43 minutes in know that at this point there's it can go many of ways, and we want to make sure that those listening have something to take away. And so this is your open mic. This is your opportunity to say anything you want. You can keep it to grief and forgiveness if you want. You can go a different direction, but it's yours. This is your mountaintop.
All right. Oh my gosh.
Because we don't know. This is episode 5. We've had, I don't know, I think the number was just under 500 people that have actually listened to the episode.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yes. Thank you.
Yeah.
But we don't know where it's going to go. And this thing's going to sit in the interweb forever. So this is your mountaintop.
So what do I want to say?
This is your mountaintop.
What do I want to say? I want to say, first of all, during this conversation, we've talked about, parenting and being angry and forgiveness. And I want to reiterate that I had wonderful parents. I had great parents. They are. My dad is an amazing person who continues to surprise me all the time. And my mom was beautiful and funny. And I mean, like really funny. She was really funny and silly and smart. And she was a great sister, and in so many ways was a great mom. But it's okay to be mad at them. It's okay to everybody has faults. Everybody has faults. You have faults. I have faults.
Only every day.
Only every day. I mean, I still think about like random situations from like elementary school where I'm like, oh God, I can't believe I said that to that person. What a jerk. And then I also think about like random things from middle school where the mean girls bullied me, and like what was going on in their lives. I have no idea. And if you remember that, I'm really sorry for whatever was going on in your life. I mean, everybody at every point has something going on in their life that is influencing the way that they are operating in the world. And it can be there can be really, really amazing people who are not on their best behavior. And there are people who don't know how to be a nice person, that they really need your help in living by example.
Do good.
Just
do good, right?
Right. I mean, in something the other day, I was saying that it doesn't, like, I want to influence positively. One of my personal core values is to influence positively. And one of those ways is to come on a podcast and talk about deep, dark things that most people don't ask. So thanks for asking. And
high five.
And just being uncomfortable sometimes. Yeah. But when you go through life and you start to get to a point where you are doing the self-examining and starting to be like, hey, I'm going to just get real comfortable with myself. You ask those questions, and then you start getting to the point where you're like, I expect nothing less than to ask and be asked. The tough stuff. 'Cause like, nice weather we're having is like, that's pleasant, but yep, almost every day, so, one of my personal core values is to influence positively, which again is why one of the reasons that I'm on this show today with you. But also, to get a message far and wide to whoever it might benefit. Most of what we're talking about today has been said in some way, some form. We're not really talking about new concepts, but we are talking about things from our perspective and to
personal
people
relatability,
right, and to people who may have never heard it before, or people who may have not heard it in the same way. And in order to really reach a lot of people, or even one person, you got to talk about it and you got to get out there. But also influencing positively, when you're driving down the road and when you're in line at the coffee shop, or, on a job site and you're talking to somebody who's frustrated with what they're doing today. You want to leave people, or I want to leave people with a better feeling than when they first encountered me. So if their day's not looking so good, I want to be able to, in some way, have them be better off after I was with them.
Exactly.
Or, that they read something that I posted on LinkedIn or whatever it might be. And so, that's how I'm trying to kind of move through life right now, is influence positively. One of the things that I also say is be the person that I needed when I was younger, because there are often times that I run into, like, gosh, if I only had a person to teach me this when I was younger, I'd be better off right now. So
that's our positive contribution to society, right?
right.
That's our we'll call it wisdom, but it is the benefit of hindsight.
Mhm.
We have experience capital. We're down the line. We've got our scars. We've got our suck, the things that we're not proud of, our failures, but we've had our successes too. And when we see opportunities where we can help positively influence someone else, even unknown people, right? This podcast, the way that we can reach others and help share our unique perspective through our experiences to potentially influence their lives moving forward, like that's what makes it all worth it.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
And I feel as if that is it is both a burden and an honor that we carry at the same time. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. I don't know how else you can phrase that up, but
Yeah. Yeah. Like, I feel like compelled that I need to get whatever it is out that I need to say. But I also am like, I don't know if anybody wants to hear that. It might be real hard for them, whatever it is.
Right.
But I guess my hope is that today we have reached someone that we needed to reach, or that needed to be reached, equipped them with some way of moving forward in a positive way. And, I guess my last thing would be to encourage you listeners to, if there's something going on in your life, tell someone about it. If there's something that you're really struggling with, even if you feel like you don't have anybody that is real close that you can count on or that you can confide in, find a professional, call a hotline, join a message board, whatever it is. Grab a journal, start writing it down, get your story out of your head and out of your gut. Because when those things are sitting in your gut, that's when they start to fester and really cause those issues in your life.
Very well said. I can't add anything on top of that. No, but honestly, thank you so much for joining me. Thank you for agreeing to come on to the show, to get a little uncomfortable, to start talking about the things, to get it out there. And you encapsulated that very well there, and I appreciate that. It's been an honor and a privilege to share the mics with you. First time on a podcast.
First time.
I like it. It. So I'm going to say this from a different perspective because you've finished there so eloquently. But to anyone listening, like, we believe in you. We believe that you can become the best version of yourself, and we are here to help. I hope that everybody who's listening found this episode to not only be insightful, but informative. We appreciate you listening to us today. This is No Singular Solutions.